Heinrich Himmler was born in Munich, Germany on October the 7th in the year of 1900 and died on May the 23rd, 1945 in Limburg, Germany. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, Heinrich Himmler initially joined the Nazi Party back in 1925 and gradually rose through the Nazi Party's ranks and was eventually elected as a deputy to the German parliament. Himmler was appointed as Reichsführer, or chief of the SS, and was Hitler's main elite bodyguard. Following Himmler's appointment as leader of the SS, he was able to use his power to expand it to reach to more than 50,000 people by 1933. Following Hitler's gain for power, Himmler became the leader of Munich police and eventually became the head of all German police units outside Prussia. He then went on to establish the Third Reich's first concentration camp. Himmler is responsible for orchestrating the purge, where the SS eliminated the SA as a power within the Nazi Party. The same purge is the one that led to the strengthening of Hitler's power over the Nazi Party and the German army. Gradually, Himmler began building and extending the SS forces into one of the most powerful armed groups in Germany alongside the German armed forces. Himmler went on to become the chief of the German police on June the 19th, 1936. Under Himmler's command, the SS acquired responsibilities over areas of security and intelligence gathering. Himmler was responsible for the infamous extermination camps in which millions upon millions of Jews were systematically slaughtered and were exposed to medical experiments. Himmler's internment camps were simply unacceptable and irrational in every way, and the sheer thought of it is utterly disturbing and immoral. So, who were the Schutzstaffel and what role did they play in German history? Well, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, the Schutzstaffel were described as the political soldiers of the Nazi Party and were known for wearing black uniforms. They were initially appointed as Hitler's bodyguards back in April 1925, but grew with the Nazi Party's success. As we discussed, Heinrich Himmler led the SS from 1929 to its fall in 1945. The SS grew from 300 people to more than 50,000 people as the Nazis came into power in 1933. Himmler generally looked for physical perfection and racial purity in his applicants, but allowed many people of different ranks of society to be part of the SS regardless. Himmler ultimately solidified the Schutzstaffel's power by gaining control over Germany's police forces, thus expanding their responsibilities and activities in Germany. Elite SS forces were then trained alongside the regular German army. By the end of 1939, the SS had a staggering 250,000 men. The SS was generally divided into two groups. First is the Allgemeine SS, or the General SS, and the other was the Waffen SS, or the Armed SS. The General SS mainly dealt with police, racial matters, domestic intelligence, and more. On the other hand, Waffen, or the Armed SS, were made up of three subgroups: the Leibstandarte, Hitler's personal bodyguards, the Totenkopfverbände, which managed the infamous concentration camps and the involuntary labor of the Jews, which we know of. And then there were the third division, and they were called the Wurfgunstruben, which was made up of elite combat troops who served beside the regular army and gained a reputation of having impressive fighters. Unfortunately, the SS men were taught the ways of racial hatred and were taught to normalize inflicting hardships on minority groups. This led to the foul execution of political opponents such as the Gypsies, the Jews, and several Polish leaders. I find it interesting how different these people used to think back in the day. I was surprised by how corrupt their minds actually were and how strong their greed for power was. I'm surprised to see how far we've come as a society in terms of moral and ethical standards. And I'm happy with all the progress we've made as humans as a whole. I was especially disappointed of how these mass murders were committed in a systematic way, because that means it was okay to do so at the time. The Einsatzgruppen, or the German deployment groups, were part of the SS, and they were Nazi security powers who acted as killing forces during the German invasion of Poland and the Soviet Union. These units were formed prior to the outbreak of the Second World War, and these units were specifically ordered to seize governmental and political materials. They were also ordered to find and arrest political enemies such as the Jews, members of the Communist Party, and those who were in opposition of the Nazi Party. In order to prepare for the invasion of Poland under the authority of Hitler, Chief of Police Heinrich Himmler formed the Einsatzgruppen, so the troops can combat suspected enemies of the German state behind the front lines. 4,250 men of the Einsatzgruppen were placed under the SS General Reinhard Heydrich. Reinhard Heydrich formed a campaign which led to the systematic arrest and execution of individuals who had any sort of threat to the German control, and by 1939 had killed 50,000 Poles, which included 7,000 Polish Jews. After these revolting actions, the same units were used in the attack of the Soviet Union, in which they were assigned special tasks. These special tasks including executing members of the Communist Party, Soviet officials, Jewish men, women, and children. In total, the Einsatzgruppen murdered an unbelievable 1.5 million Jews. The Einsatzgruppen are a disgraceful group of people, and the hardship they inflicted on minorities shall never be forgotten. The trouble they caused and the sheer number of people they murdered in their time is simply horrifying. Personally, I find it alarming how these people got away with what they did at the time, and I am grateful that I do not have to live in a time where systematic mass murder is evident.